Hey there, beautiful human beings, and welcome back to the Ryan Magic Show. I'm really excited to continue this conversation. If you haven't watched the last episode, part one of a deep look into the complexities of childhood trauma, please do that first because this is a continuation of that episode. And so this is really about understanding thoroughly what happens in breath work, what happens if you see a therapist, what happens if you're doing NLP, what happens if you working with a coach that's trying to support you with your childhood pain. And that's what we're going through. And I'm giving a very different look into what I perceive to be the really full process of healing childhood trauma. So to recap what we went through in the last episode, we really established what the damage of childhood trauma is. Not the damage, but what's the impact on our quality of life. And essentially, it is a inhibitor to our full authenticity in the world. If we have certain experiences in our childhood that are unresolved, where we felt really unsafe, we have a part of us that defragments and becomes exiled and disintegrated from our way of approaching life and our very being. And when we do childhood trauma, we learn to feel safe with experiences that taught us that the world is something to be hypervigilant in and that we need to look out for. And the real impact of that in our lives is that we actually can feel quite easily triggered. Even if it's in a subtle level, anxiety can come online because life doesn't feel like a safe place. And this can be the truth for someone that's an incredibly successful CEO and they look like they've got it all together. They're brutal, they're super organized and disciplined, they're very strongly spoken. And that can be a big mask. And that can be a big act of, this is the person that I need to be so no one gets through. I'm in control. I'm leading this company. I have the final say. And no one has the right to ask me anything that could get towards the truth of how I'm feeling under it all, which is, I'm scared that I'm not lovable. I'm scared that I'm not enough. And this whole life that I've created is a big facade for those fears. And not to go off track too much here, but this is a common thing that I see with CEOs and oftentimes female CEOs and female entrepreneurs that are so, just everyone's gorgeous for who they are, but they're beautiful people, really powerful women. However, I often find that, and I coach a lot of these women, that they've got a lot of walls up and their success is coming from an unhealthy place in some cases. And the effect for them is that we can kind of see this or identify it relatively easily if they really struggle to meet their partner and they're single and they have problems with men. And this is the same with men and women. Nothing can be hidden when it comes to relationships. If you look at my relationship trauma, it's like, that's my biggest karma. And I really struggle. I don't want to put that forward into the future, but I have really gone through a lot and still continue to have unsafety come up quite regularly in my relationship. And I have unhealthy safety strategies to try to compensate for those fears that impact my relationship not in the most healthy way. So totally get it. And that's what childhood trauma does. And so we've identified, okay, it's important to work with. How do we actually heal it? Well, first and foremost, through the process of doing direct healing work, because childhood trauma can be supported with ERP, exposure response prevention, which is like exposure therapy, which is not to do with going into a healing journey, into the past, into memories, emotions, going into the experience of healing. But there are 3 things that are required in the healing experience. When you're doing a therapy session or breath work, whatever the actual mechanism that you're intentionally leaning into to support that trauma, those fragmented parts, there are 3 key aspects to it. The first one is that that fragmented part needs to feel safe enough and held enough by your own inner mother that they can feel what's happening, usually in the way of vulnerable emotions, like fear. I really feel the fear. I'm scared. Feel the sadness and the grief, and be with those more vulnerable emotions. That's a really important aspect of the healing journey. And there are a lot of doing that is not just about feeling. That's not how this box gets ticked. And if you really want to understand that more nuanced, watch Advanced Emotional Healing. That episode, I've already said that enough now, but I'd highly recommend that. However, in feeling the vulnerable emotion in a really healthy way, which requires safety, it requires someone to feel comfortable enough in their emotional body to go there. It requires someone to be in a state during that healing journey where they're regulated enough that that fragmented part, that exiled part, can sense that there's enough leadership there, there's enough solidity there from the inner mother to be able to hold. And I found this myself at certain times, like I've worked with certain space holders that I perceive feel uncomfortable with their own emotions, or they feel uncomfortable leading me into my emotions, and my emotion just doesn't come up. It just, I go into freeze because I can sense that the leader that's present to hold space for me doesn't have the capacity to hold space. And my fragile nervous system goes, no, I'm not going to feel that. How can I trust you or the situation for me to be in my deepest vulnerability if I don't perceive that you're grounded enough? Whereas when I see a really confident mother, the sort of mother that can love their child enough to not go into their own massive insecurities on a plane when the child's crying, and they have that really confident maternal capacity of soothing and nurturing and giving those affirming words like, hey baby, come here, it's okay, I got you, come here, it's all good, I've got you. And they are full enough and connected to their higher self enough to hold space for that. So that is really, really important. That is a big aspect of the healing journey. Once the memory has been identified and that exile part can come into the scenario, it doesn't always have to be by going into, there are different nuanced ways, but a flavor is that the exile part needs to come into the situation, that separated part that is holding onto that trauma and needs to be felt. So that's that. The next component, just quick action. Now we'll do this at the end. The next component is the inner father needs to come online. So we spoke about the inner mother being a function of unconditional love, and the inner mother does that through nurture, and that creates safety for the inner child to feel. The inner father also, as the second component as to what's important in the healing journey, is that the inner father needs to come online. And the inner father can support the traumatic memory by creating safety and protection for that inner child. And that looks like setting boundaries, being very strong. This is the dark masculine. Dark has got a negative association to that word, but it just means the protection, the one that can cut through, that can be firm and direct. And this is something that I discovered through doing some work with a psychotherapist, was when I first opened up to this idea. And then just by working with people and noticing that they don't incorporate this in their healings, is that, think of it this way. If there is a child in a house and the mother's home with the child and the father's overseas at work, someone breaks into that house. They've got a knife and they want to steal a bunch of things and they want to do harm. Now, if the mother's there with the child and the mother is soothing and nurturing and saying, hey, it's okay. You can feel these emotions. You can be here with this. You're so welcome as you are. I love you as you are. And they're nurturing the inner child as the inner child's in terror and fear. And then the child's crying and the mum's comforting the child. But then the perpetrator comes into the house and comes closer. And then the child starts screaming more and screaming and screaming, terrified for the child's terrified for its safety. And then the mum gets, I know this is quite a brutal example, but it's got merit in it. The mum gets stabbed. The perpetrator, I'm just going to say, is a man, and stabs the mum. Now the child's there by themselves, and then the child gets stabbed. So the nurture's not enough for the child to feel safe, and the extent to what childhood trauma can look like in its more intense side of experiences is really, really scary situations, like sexual abuse. And just to be nurtured and held in that's not enough. The child also needs to energetically and emotionally and practically know that the father is there to protect them. And that's a very different energy to the emotional healing through the feminine. The emotional healing through the feminine is so important, but by itself, the inner child won't feel fully safe. And so what this can look like is getting the person that is in the healing process to put their hand up and say, no. And I'm going to use some intense language here, but that is what's required in some situations. Back the fuck off. You will not talk to my child like that. Do you understand? Do you fucking understand? And this can be very confronting for someone. So what I will usually do is I'll usually get them to put their inner child out of the environment. And so they're not witnessing it and being traumatized by this, but yet the energetic transmission can still be felt and received. And so if energetically someone's inner child has a belief that they weren't held and protected by the father or the mother, but the masculine energy when they were younger and something happened to them. Like, for example, with me, my dad used to yell at myself and my sister and our family a lot. There was a lot of yelling. And I was told at one point in my healing journey by a space holder, hey, like, have a conversation with your dad and let your dad know that it's not okay to yell at you like that at the dinner table. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll have this conversation. And this is what I said, something along the lines of, hey, Dad, I know you've got your trauma. I know you're doing the best you can. I know that you're hurting right now, and I'm sorry that you're going through this. And I want you to know that I love you, and that I know you're doing your best. And I just want to let you know that when you talk to my inner child like that, he feels really unsafe. And I just want to let you know that's not okay. And I was internally at that point when I was doing this healing with a psychotherapist who was very experienced, a lady around 70 something years old, been doing it for 40 years, incredible psychotherapist. And then her feedback to me was that was a really poor effort, in the sense of that wasn't enough to create safety there. She said, Superman punching your dad over the table in the face would have been healthier than what you just did. Obviously, that's an extreme on the other polarity. But the point that she was making is that choosing a space and time to be a pleaser. When the inner father comes online, if I was in the woods and a bear was coming to myself and my family, and I was like, hey, bear, look, I know you're hungry. I know you want to eat me and my family. And I just appreciate it if you didn't. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I would scream at the bear. I would throw shit at the bear. I would be, get the fuck away from my family to protect my family. And that's healthy. That's healthier than trying to have a conversation with the bear. It would be ridiculous to do that. And just because we're in this culture where it is so politically incorrect to harness the masculine energy, particularly the dark masculine energy that sets boundaries and says, no, this is my opinion and I'm allowed to speak my truth. Back off. That's not okay. That's not okay. That's seen as toxic masculinity. It's actually really important. It's setting a boundary. A boundary is a line between ourselves and others. And if it's not okay for us to state our own truth and be our own sovereign beings, we're being gaslit to losing ourselves and losing our own protection, losing our own source of safety within us. And then we outsource that safety to others. Bit of a side rant here. And it's relevant in this situation because the way that I showed up in that was a product of me growing up in society as I'll only be liked if I comply. I'll only be liked if I'm a really good boy and I'm really kind. But the second element to really healing childhood trauma requires the person with the trauma to bring their inner father in and come online and set some firm fucking boundaries of what is and isn't okay. And so that can look like actually having the confidence to confront the person that has created that pain and that trauma. And it can look like letting anger out as well. So when I spoke about the first important aspect, being very vulnerable and delicate and gentle emotions that naturally come up, the fear emotions, the terror, the shame, the grief and the sadness, this looks like going full out with anger. Full anger. That can look like pillow smashing. That can look like screaming, violently shaking your body, looking like you're possessed in an exorcism. I'm exaggerating on the upper edge of intensity of anger releasing, but this inner father can be a permission giver to let anger out. Hey, you're safe. I've got you. Do whatever you want. You couldn't hurt me anyway because I'm a strong adult man. Hit me with what you've got. Your emotions welcome here. I've got your back. Go to town. So there's the aspect of the father setting boundaries with the perpetrator and being fucking cutthroat. Like if someone tried to hurt my daughter, I don't have a daughter, but hopefully I will at some point. Someone tried to hurt them, I would kill them. I would actually, if someone in the process was trying to hurt my child, like I would do what I had to do to stop that threat from happening. And my intention is not, are people going to like me based on how I'm acting? The intention is, I've got a job to do as a father, and that's protect my daughter or son. And so I feel that's a healthy, lost quality in society. And so a lot of modalities are so beautiful at incorporating the feminine and that inner mother, but really don't give permission for the inner father to come online. And I've got my whole own mother-father healing modality, as I might have mentioned at the start of the last episode. But with that modality, often when I've worked with people with it, getting them to access anger towards usually a parent that the trauma was based around. The first 15 minutes in that conversation looks like, I don't have any anger towards them. It doesn't exist. I'm not angry at all. Like, I understand they did their best. I'm grateful that they brought me up and had me. I wouldn't be here without them. And they're bypassing the anger. And then my job is to make sure that they can access that more intense aggression, anger, rage, so that they can complete the cycle of healing. And it's not just, okay, cool, I'm going to heal, but I'm only going to look at the emotions that I feel safe with. Now, this is about creating safety for the child. And that looks like all emotions being welcome. And that includes anger. And so whenever, like I said, the thing that's really telling for me around this trauma healing journey is that the catharsis that comes up when we touch on something that's true for us inside, it's not just, oh yeah, cool, I'm feeling a little bit sad. Where? No, it's we touch the trauma, we touch the moments, and we get overwhelmed with a deep, involuntary release of sadness that where we're wailing and there's tears. That was inside of us. And I've never worked with someone that didn't have an authentic, cathartic level of anger towards their parents and people that have inflicted trauma on them. Once they remove the layers of political incorrectness and fear of anger, etc. And so there are two components to this second component in the trio of what's required of bring on the inner father. That inner father can set boundaries with the perpetrator and create a space for the inner child to feel safe to go all the way there with that anger. Swearing, yelling, pillow smashing, temper tantrums, all of it, roaring, guttural noises. And along with that, a really important release technique is primal thrusting. Primal thrusting is when you're humping a pillow, but with rage. And this is, again, what I'm about to say is incredibly politically incorrect. But I would say grow up with this. It's kind of like the energy of asserting dominance through sexuality. And that's what causes sexual abuse and rape. Very intense word, rape. It's almost like you can't say Voldemort. You can't say rape, but it's the difference in what's stored in the hips, or if sexual abuse was inflicted upon someone as a child, pillow smashing and whatnot has a certain amount of power, but primal thrusting and letting out rage and anger through the hips, that dominance of I am using sex to own you can be a reclamation of power. If someone took your power away as a child, and that's the abuse you're working with or the trauma you're working with, and you don't do primal thrusting as a way of letting that anger out, well, there's very much going to be the potential for the person still to feel powerless and walk through life in a way where that trauma is not complete because they didn't access that level of reclaiming their power through primal thrusting of I'm reclaiming my power and I'm going to assert my dominance over you energetically so that it's clear that there's a boundary here. Yeah, I know I'm touching some intense topics, and I perceive that if you're on this podcast, you have the maturity to hold that. Very important second component of this healing journey. Bringing the inner father online and really setting boundaries and accessing anger. And my gosh, when I get people to confront trauma towards certain parents in mother and father healings, this usually looks like 45 to 60 minutes of going to town on someone, letting anger out like crazy when the belief was, I don't have any anger. And what the hell just came out of you? There was anger there. It's an important component. And in this like peace, love, and light culture, in the spiritual, emotional healing community, this is a really important flavor to add into the mix. Bring in the masculine, the healing journey. And if you go to a breathwork event or a cacao ceremony or a sound healing, there's usually more women than men there because the culture is, and as a result, the culture is more feminine. So that doesn't mean that we don't need masculine and feminine to heal. We need both. Very important. The third aspect of this journey is forgiveness and reaching equanimity. Forgiveness and reaching equanimity. So the truth of the universe is that everything that happens is perfect. Now, if someone was sexually abusing me or stabbing me or torturing me, for me to go inside my head and be like, oh, everything's perfect. And you know what? There's equal benefits and drawbacks to everything. So, I'm not going to want to inflict any harm on this person. They're just playing a role in the universe. And this is just everything is love at the end of the day. That is huge spiritual bypassing for the fact that we're a human being. Sure, we have the being aspect. We have that spirit. We're a spiritual being having a human experience, and we're having the human experience. So to reach this third stage before the first two, in my experience, is ridiculously immature. And I'm putting a bit of a boundary up here because, and speaking strongly to this, and I'm excited to bring this message more out there because I feel like a lot of people unfortunately miss this step in the healing journey. The difference between transcending the ego, the human, the animal, the difference between that and the difference between maturing the ego. We can transcend it, sure. We can be like, yeah, well, there's equal benefits and drawbacks. Everything's got equal positive and negative. Everything's equal. There is no good and bad. There's no right and wrong. Everything is equal. That's true at a spiritual level, but we're not just having a spiritual experience. So it's actually false on a human level. And we're a human being. So that this is an important part to not get to until the other components are thoroughly addressed. So letting the child feel the inner mother, setting boundaries with the inner father, and the inner mother and the inner father working together as a unit to be able to support the inner child to express all of their experience and to confront all of their experience. This is, if this is addressed before the first one's done to a healthy level or to a point of completion, even if it's completion for that stage of their healing that thing, if someone skips straight to this third stage, it's really bypassy and really unhealthy. So that needs to be done first. Yeah. And so some examples of modalities that kind of do this, like I mentioned, the presence process with Michael Brown. Very powerful book. It's one of the most powerful books I've read. Misses the masculine component. It's all about taking responsibility and trusting that everything emotionally that comes up for a reason. And so we need to take responsibility for our own feelings as a spiritual being on this planet. That's true, but it's bypassy. It's the same as Byron Katie's The Work. It's got a spiritual undertone. Spirit is whole, perfect, and complete. It is equanimous in its purity. You're going to a place of infinite creation where protons and electrons spur from. It's not just neutral. It's not positive or negative. It's oneness, wholeness, positive and negative in equal balance, coming together as one. When we defragment and become a separate being, a manifest form in the universe, everything has got positive and negative in it on a spiritual level, but experiences become subjective, and that subjective experience is important to address as well. And that is playing in the gray area of the experience. It's very convenient to see life through a spiritual lens and everything's perfect and only use that. I feel like that's an incomplete approach to healing. It's only working on one dimension. And as a result, you'll find that someone that has that perspective will lack humanity and compassion. For Demartini, for example, who I love and adore, and I'm so grateful for his wisdom, and for him to be able to say, like, if someone was to sexually abuse my daughter, I would understand the role that that's playing. I feel like that's bypassing his humanity. Sure, and some people need to play that role as thought leaders in the world to really push their messages out there. And I've got a strong spiritual undertone myself, but it's very emotionally immature. And same thing with Muji, who's one of the most, is just an incredible spiritual guru. But he essentially says trauma works bypassing, because the truth is that your isness, to work on trauma is to address something that's not the truth. It's to address your separation and playing the gray area. That's not, the truth is light, nothingness and everythingness, found in isness, timeless love, infinite, wholeness, oneness, the divine. And that's bypassy. That's bypassy. Massively bypassy. And so bringing it back to trauma healing, if there's a child, imagine, I'm coming up with some wild examples in here, and apologize if it does trigger, because sometimes I can be intense with this sort of stuff. But if like a fully grown man open palm slaps a 4-year-old, and the dad comes up to the 4-year-old and says, hey, stop crying. There are benefits to that. It's just ridiculous. It's just so unhealthy and unintegrated. And I really feel like integration is what creates a feeling of full groundedness and safety. So anyway, just before going into this, Byron Katie's The Work is entering more of a, let's just deal with the truth here. You're saying you got this trigger and trauma, but is it actually true? Can you absolutely know it's true? What's the effect of believing this thought? And it's a cool little thing to jump into to reveal truth. Reveals truth quickly. Reminds us, it's not true. The trauma's not true. You're not actually walking around unsafe because of what happened when you're a kid. But the child's in there. And if the emotions are bypassed, to me, that's not cool. That's not complete. And it can essentially be a self-administered gaslighting. And I've had this done before to me, where I've been at certain events where the thought leaders have facilitated a beautiful process of forgiveness. Forgiveness work is done very regularly through lots of conscious spaces and events. And there's been certain stages of my healing journey where I've been journeying with certain trauma, and I've been in the season of giving myself permission to be angry about it. And man, that's been powerful and needed for me, to confront that anger and be like, you know what, Mum? Screw you. And I'm not saying it to her face, because I'm journeying with it in my own internal world. And I'm still using discernment of what is a healthy way to bring it up in the world. But in my own process, it's like, no, I don't want to catch up. Screw you. You did this and you let me down like this, and my inner child felt like this, and that's not cool. And so that's important, because it honors the experience of the child. If that's bypassed, then the child feels ashamed for ever feeling that in the first place. Oh my gosh. My mum was doing the best that they can. So it's like, again, if I use an extreme example, it becomes super obvious what I'm saying here. But if a fully grown man open palm slaps a child, and you go to the child and say, hey, let's just have some compassion for that man and let's forgive them now, because they've obviously gone through pain and probably had a more difficult upbringing than you, and they're just projecting their own pain and hurt. It's true. It's just not what's needed. It's not what's needed. I'd first be with the child and reestablish safety and give them permission to feel all the sadness, cry for as long as it takes. Bring the father online to make sure that man is not going to hurt them. Make sure they're in custody, make sure they're far, far away, make sure they're never going to get back and touch my daughter again, right? And that would be the first point of call. But then at some point, probably not for that child as a child, but as an adult, it's important as an adult on the spiritual journey to be able to see the truth. Not before experiencing the emotion and giving the child the full experience and creating full safety, but after, to complete the healing process, to come in with the Demartini Method, where you're gathering data of how everything is equanimous. That's powerful. It's true, right? And it's not going to create full safety for the child. The emotion's not necessarily fully felt. Yeah. And so forgiveness work, to me, needs to be treated with a lot of responsibility. It can be very, very minimizing and inconsiderate to invite someone into forgiveness for a piece they haven't finished journeying with yet. Because it's intervening, and it is negating their experience. And if someone does that, if someone can't honor their experience fully, then they can't honor themselves fully. And so they'll walk around feeling that they're not okay for who they are. That's not cool. It's important. And sure, like let's say, for example, there was someone that came to me, there was a man, and when he was younger, he was sexually abused. And I say, hey, look, everything happens for a reason. Let's look at the path. Let's look at what that's created for you. Would you even be a coach if it wasn't for that? Would you be living the life that you're living right now if it wasn't for that? But inside, that person's inner child is feeling sad and angry. That person might be able to go, yeah, it is beautiful that I get to do all this stuff. But the way that that person will carry themselves through life will lack solidity. And I can see this and feel this in so many participants in trauma work, healing work, emotional and somatic release work, parts work, inner child work, that they lack a strong sense of self because they haven't fully honored their experience and being able to own themselves for who and where they are. So forgiveness is a really important piece. Equanimity is a really important piece of the puzzle, but it's the final piece. And it can be beautiful to go back in after your inner child feels safe now, boundaries have been set now, your inner child feels tended to first, they've been able to feel the full extent of the experience first, and then to come back yourself as an adult, integrated and a little bit more whole, and send love to the perpetrator, send love to your mother or father, and to see them with compassion, see them in their fragility, and to be able to send them love and wish the best for them can be a beautiful final piece of the puzzle. Beautiful. And it's very important for one's journey to their most powerful, authentic, and whole self. That's what this work does. That's what the healing work does. And to remember, we need to recruit safety for the inner child initially, but then also remember the truth. And the truth is that everything is positive and negative. Yeah, we're remembering situations as good or bad, right or wrong, positive and negative based on its contribution to our survival. We associate, it's good. It's good that I'm going out for dinner tonight because our mind says, sweet, food, survival, this is positive. You get a promotion at work, this is good. Then if you lose your job, this is bad because it might impact my survival. And so we have this full lens through which we view the world from our ego, from our head, from our fear body that says good and bad, right and wrong. And it's not the truth. Everything is beautiful. Everything is love. And that's the spiritual perspective. That is an evolved spiritual perspective. Very, very important. And if one can't get to the point of forgiveness, it's probably because they haven't accessed the first two elements that I spoke to, with the inner mother and the inner father coming online. And there is resentment there. There is anger there. They go, how dare you get me to find forgiveness here? How could I forgive someone that did that to me? What can we sense in that tone? There's resentment, there's anger. If they process the anger, it's not going to be there as much. They process the anger with their inner father online, process the sadness with their inner mother online, the shame, then there's going to be a completion to this, right? So forgiveness is very important. It's very powerful. And it acknowledges if we become a little bit more whole in ourselves, we can actually feel more at peace with people in the world that do that same form of abuse. And that allows us to be compassionate to ourselves. If we're having an off day and we project at someone, we can love ourselves in that. And if we can love ourselves in that and not shame ourselves, we come back to love and come back to regulation easier. So it's easier for us to apologize and hold love towards people instead of judgment. But if we can't find that forgiveness piece, if we can't find and see the truth, the universal truth, that there is equanimity and equality in this, if we can't find that, then it's going to be an incomplete healing process. That childhood trauma is not going to be properly supported. The remembering process back to wholeness won't be fully there. So I just want to mention like a couple of them. Just realize for your own benefit. Cool. If you go into and someone's like, oh my gosh, there's this epic healing journey that you can do. This is modality. It's breath work, and it's a certain type of breath work. You can say, well, what's the purpose of it? And they say, well, you just heal your trauma. And now you can be like, okay, well, you can just through your own internal thing go, this person's been told breathwork heals trauma, but they don't understand the full spectrum of trauma. So you can hear someone saying, do this breathwork thing, it's going to heal you and change your life completely. And you can acknowledge and understand, it's helping me get in my body and feel things and bring trauma experiences up, bypass my mind and maybe bring out some exiled parts. But it's not the full process. It's not the full process. And so that's my goal for you. It's to understand what the journey looks like so that you can be there and be a real master of your own healing journey around this. Okay? If someone's like, hey, there's this epic modality. It's all about universal law and it's about seeing the truth. And, I got told that through string theory and quantum entanglement, there's actually equal, like nothing is separate. Everything is one. And you go to a Demartini thing, you're like, that's the way. You can say, that's universal truth, but it's not necessarily the full truth. If you listen to Joe Dispenza talk about there's the animal and then there's the being supernatural. And when you access that place of no time, no space, nowhere, no body, etc., that place of possibility and birthing and manifesting, you can say, okay, cool. He is saying, let's move towards universal truth. But what about confronting the actual emotions relevant to the trauma of why someone's paraplegic? Complete the cycle. Not just have it in a bypassy way. So anyway, that's that. Now that's how to heal it in the healing journey. But one piece that I wanted to exclude from those three, so we have the inner mother, we have the inner father, and then we have universal law. So we have masculine, feminine, and unity. Mother, father, and universal as three flavors of the healing journey, predicated on the fact that you've identified a trigger or resistance or an exiled part or emotion, trauma or wounding that's coming up, and then established enough safety and resource to be able to go into the healing process. They're the three components that I see. This is just my perspective. This is my intellectual property that I created to support myself, to not have people say, here's how you need to heal. You should do it like this. And then people telling me, you need to feel it. And it's like, I'm actually at a point where I've felt it enough. I actually need to connect to the truth of universal law, or people saying, you need to forgive that person. Me being like, how about you shut up and let me be in my anger? Don't bypass my inner child. How dare you? And be able to stand up. Obviously, I'm not going to respond to someone that's well-meaning like that in the moment, but absolutely setting a boundary and saying, hey, I appreciate your intention, sure. And please don't give me advice around my healing journey. I know what's needed, and I'm considered anger and give myself permission for that. This is my journey. And I've had a lot of people project their judgment of their own non-permission to be angry, and therefore judge my anger. And because I had shame and didn't know if that was okay or not, then I would also not give it full permission and maybe go, oh my gosh, why am I being angry? I need to skip to forgiveness. No, that's not how it works. Unhealthy and it's bypassing. Anywho, that's that. The component outside that healing journey though, outside the let's do a process on this, is actually stepping more into life. And this is where some of the contradictions can meet in integration. It could be arguable that someone that's really has a beautiful feminine healing modality about unconditional love and nurture for an inner child could look at someone that's masculine and intense and go, that's a perpetrator in the making. And then actually judge someone bringing their anger to the surface. And vice versa. Someone that's all about setting boundaries could look at someone in an emotional healing journey and judge that. Or someone that's really about emotional healing could look at someone like Byron Katie's process and go, that's so clinical and intellectual. Or look at Demartini and go, that's so intellectual. But it's universal law. It's all got merit. They're all valuable. And one factor that's really important here is that we take the learning and we bring it to the world. So if you can know, for example, that, there's trauma coming up around judgment and feeling like I'm going to be abandoned. That's why I'm struggling to do my lives on Facebook and share my message. And then you do use the inner mother, the inner father. You then see the equanimity in the situation. Then you actually have to do it. You got to cultivate your nervous system, learning safety through exposure to do the live and show yourself, demonstrate. Because if you just have a conversation with your inner child about it, it's still going to be new and access fear on some level when it comes to actually practicing being out there in the world and creating safety for yourself in the situations in real life. That's the unspoken piece. And that is with the full healing experience, still putting yourself out there, still integrating it into the real world. And this is cool because we've got the emotional healing journey here. We've got the feminine and the masculine. We've got boundary setting and we got masculine. We've got the spiritual, seeing fullness and wholeness and oneness and forgiveness work and equanimity and taking responsibility, etc. But then we also have the practical. Let's get it done. Let's go out there now and use because the healing journey is about bringing our authenticity into the world. Spirituality in its most powerful form is about bringing us into the world more. And so that is not to be understated, that once you've done a bunch of healing work on certain trauma, what was that trauma blocking you from authentically expressing? Not you should go out and do everything. No. What do you actually want to in your heart express, but you didn't have the capacity to because these resistance points and wounding and trauma and unsafety in your body was making it really difficult? Go out there now and do it. Put yourself into the situation where you've previously not had the capacity to hold yourself and learn to hold yourself in the situations, in real life, in the world. Yeah. So I've got some fuzzy feelings inside of, I really feel that this is empowering to know. I know that if you can take stock of this and use it just to look at different perspectives in the world and go of healing and different people and your friends that are all about breath work, just internally knowing, okay, cool. That's helping with maybe the nurturing aspect. Cool. I've got friends out there that are really big on setting boundaries. Oh, cool. They've got the masculine aspect. I've got friends out there that are all about spirituality. Okay, cool. That's just universal truth. Okay, cool. I can now be inspired to lead my own way of finding a full healing process around different difficulties. And you get to intuitively navigate what you're going to do. You get to choose whether what's needed is to feel more right now, what's needed is to set boundaries more, what's needed is some forgiveness at the moment. It doesn't have to all be done in one session. I actually have a modality of how I do that. And it's not better. Sometimes people have to journey with that anger for longer, and that's the theme of that particular trauma they're working through. Sometimes it's about compassion and self-forgiveness and unconditional love and holding through that nurturing energy. Sometimes it's a journey of like seeing the truth under the surface of universal law. I very rarely talk about universal law, but because we're talking about Demartini, because we're talking about Byron Katie, because then there's a lot of people that I see out there in the world that preach spiritual wisdom. It's new age spirituality, and it's like this light divine energy, but there's no hands in the mud of Pachamama, wild woman wolf howling on the full moon. They're disconnected from their body, and they're connected to their third eye, crown chakra, and maybe their solar plexus, but potentially disconnected from their heart, disconnected from their sacral chakra, which is all about the feminine flow, disconnected from their primal root chakra, disconnected from the love and the openness and the embodiment. This is a full spectrum, integrated way to approach healing, to look at it through this multifaceted lens. And it is more difficult because it's not just, this is the answer, do a Demartini breakthrough. This is the answer, breathwork will just get you there. This is the answer, just go take action in the world. This is the answer, working with a psychotherapist and inner child work. Well, they're like none of them in particular are the answer. You get to be your own guru. You get to be your own leader and back and tune into what you know is needed with that particular trauma. And this is giving you a surface layer perspective. I've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours learning about all these different facets. So I don't expect you to be able to know exactly what's needed for you in a moment, but hopefully this just helps give some high level awareness around what's involved in a more integrated and embodied healing journey with childhood trauma. So that's enough for content. Come to the Art of Fulfillment workshop. I will create what I go through in this podcast is cool. If you come to the Art of Fulfillment, you will understand so much about how the universe works, and you'll be able to leave having a whole different perspective on life that will empower you more than you've ever felt before. And as you can sense into, my approach is very integration based. I want you to see the personal and spiritual development landscape through a lens of, I know what the meaning of life is. I understand the purpose of life. And I feel rock solid with who I am and where I am. I feel epic about where I'm going. I feel able and capable to handle the emotional world, relationships, my health, business, purpose, money. Come to the Art of Fulfillment workshop. It is my life's work in a container, and it is very immersive, very experiential, and very powerful. And it's very affordable. RyanMagic.com. If you've got questions, you can email me, ryan@ryanmagic.com. You can message me on Instagram @theryanmagic.com. And if you haven't left a review on this podcast, please drop one in there. That'd mean the world to me. I love you guys. You're always free to reach out, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Peace.